It's time, folks. We got 6 clips from Troy Dannen's most recent interview with HuskerOnline. Go ahead, and I've got the headline to the clips here. All right, the first one is talking about Dannen, talking about the Tennessee scheduling and things of that nature. Go ahead and roll that first clip there, Jake, and then you and I can both react.
Yeah, and it's really tied to the stadium renovation project. You know, as months have gone on, and we've really gotten our plans for what we want to do, it's become more and more obvious that we were going to be down capacity in 27. There's just no way around it. And so from a financial standpoint, the idea of playing 7 games at a 20% reduced capacity in 27 was going to be a real financial killer. And right now, you know, as we try to implement the revenue share model and everything else, you know, eyes and first and foremost are focused on, are we going to be able to continue to fund ourselves? And we looked and said, we need 8 games in that year with the stadium renovation. And we approached Tennessee and said, hey, are you willing to push this back again? I know we already did it, but, you know, we did it at your request last time so you could play that game at the racetrack. But could you push it back for us to accommodate this? And they couldn't, which I understand. And no harm there. This was our decision and our call. And so if they couldn't push it back and delay it, we just canceled the series. We've been working for the last couple of months on who could fit into those games. We had an FCS opening anyway, and that's where Northern Iowa came from. And that had to be filled. And then adding 2 MAC schools to replace games in those 2 years, which gives us 7 and 8 and 27, which essentially, you know, the math works out. It gives us 7 full home games or 8 maybe reduced capacity games. But it's really a long-term financial play based on the stadium being down, at least in part, in 27.
So a couple of things real quick. You have that tweet from Danny White, Tennessee's athletic director, who, by the way, was the athletic director at UCF when Scott Frost was there the first time. And if you remember, there was some not so great feelings when Scott Frost left there the first time, starting with the AD. And now that's the guy at Tennessee who's lambasting Nebraska publicly and leaving out the fact that Nebraska asked to move. They just conveniently left it out. Hey, we asked them to move. They said they couldn't. Now, it's a year before the game. Now, Dannen gave us some more information there that I missed the first time I heard it. They had a couple of months to fill the opening with the Tennessee series being canceled. So you could say, hey, Adam, this is all within a year. That's tough on Tennessee. Okay, well, he didn't say any of that. Here's all he said in his tweet. Go ahead, Jake, read that.
He said, correction, Tennessee is not canceling this series. Nebraska did. We are very disappointed that they didn't want to play these games, especially this close to 2026.
Is there more? I remember it being worse than that.
I think he did have some, let's see.
Was there some other ones that you were trying to be nice about and left out? Or
I think that I think that was like him tweeting. He might have replied to others. But yeah, I mean, he's basically also did like quick interviews with it. He was not happy about it.
He was pretty pissed. I don't know how else to put it. He is. I know that's not proper English. All right, but he was pissed. But to me, I find it disingenuous. Like, tell the whole thing. They asked us to move it. It's a year before and we couldn't. Just going to leave that all out. Just going to throw it on Nebraska. They backed out. I'm paraphrasing. They're cowards. They don't want to play. We're disappointed, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, here's a little bit more context. By the way, I'm the former UCF AD that lost Scott Frost to you guys, and I've been upset with you ever since, and now's my chance to lambaste you publicly. And now, honestly, if he wants, he can schedule Timbuktu you, and nobody's going to say a word, and they can get an extra win. We literally, if you want to argue, you could argue this was not the goal of ours. You could argue we did them an easy favor. Like, they could have this cupcake offseason schedule and say, it's not our fault. You can't hold it against us, College Football Playoff Committee, if that thing's still around in a couple of years. That's not a huge factor. My point is I found it disingenuous because you left out a lot of information. Now, when you think about not being at full capacity, especially in the South Stadium, a few years ago, Bill Moose talked about, with all the different revenue streams and things of that nature, they make around $8 million, not billion, $8 million. Let me emphasize the M, not the B. There is no B. $8 million per home game. You times that, okay, they're down 15,000 seats during this renovation. So they're going to be down about, whatever that is, about 20% in total revenue, give or take. Times that by 7. All right, I think that comes out to a little over $11 million. Had that occurred to you that that's the amount of money they might be missing out on, Jake? That much?
It
Holy
is a
cow.
lot, yeah.
Now, you schedule this 8th game, and let's say you get $8 million back. Plus, so I don't know which one it is. I've seen people say, oh, Nebraska had to pay $1 million to get out of this. And then I saw Brett McMurphy tweet, it was $500,000. Do you know which amount it is?
So I think Brett McMurphy corrected himself and originally said it was $500,000 to cancel the series, and then said it was $1 million. It's $500,000 per game. Yeah.
Okay. But even with this additional game, like, we're not going to make up the revenue lost.
Well, then you got to pay them, the additional team
To
to
leave.
come in as well.
Well, yes, that's all that you got to. I don't think there was anything they could do to try to make up the full $11 million, 20% over 7 games.
9 home games, I suppose, but you can't get away with that.
Just add it. So my true freshman year, we played. This was back when there was 11 regular season games. We scheduled a 12th game, and then we played Arizona State at home. Fabian Washington had a pick 6 as a true freshman. I was redshirting this year. In the 4th quarter, pork chop, Corey Ross came in, and fans got the first glimpse of what Corey Ross could do late in that game as well. But it was some sort of, remember we had all the classics? It wasn't the kickoff class. So we had 13 games, and then a bowl game was 14. So you used to be able to schedule all these extra games. Now, with the CFP, I don't know what you want to do all that. But my point is, if they don't do this, they're out roughly $11.2 million altogether. Well, holy Moses Malone. So just so everyone knows, the cap that's coming is $20.5 million for all your sports for the revenue share. The goal for football is $14.5 million because there's way more football players on a team than there is any other team, and football makes the most money. It just is what it is. Nobody talks more other sports than me, I would imagine, but it is what it is. And so that leaves roughly $6 million for all your other sports combined. And now we're talking about 11.2 they would have missed out on. I still wish we were playing Tennessee. But if I'm Troy Dannen, I do one of two things in this situation. When I sit down and do this math, and I'm not a math major, but I'm like, either we're not doing the renovations, which clearly they need to be done. Otherwise, I don't know why we're doing them. So I assume they need to be done. I'm not a South Stadium or stadium construction expert or anything. But the other thing is I do what he did. And I try to figure out other ways to make up more money. Because 11.2 is almost that 14.5 that you have just for your football team, and you would have lost it in 1 year. Did any of this occur to you? Until I sat down and did some of this research, none of it occurred to me until over the weekend.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all brought on by this Tennessee move, and I saw too. A reporter I talked to, Dannen, said Dannen had like 4 or 5 emails about it. There's not as much of an uproar as maybe we might think. It's just the people that are upset. But I think like we talked about last week, it's just kind of how you frame something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is if you say if Nebraska was able to write the headline, it's you get an extra game, you get an extra chance to bring people in. We know there's going to be some stadium renovations, so the tickets are going to be hard to come by. We're going to give you an extra game. But then, it broke. Nebraska backs out of Tennessee series, so there's kind of a negative feeling attached to it. But, it does make sense. Again, I will never worry about the university's money. I'm sorry. When they did the Scott Frost thing,
I'm with you.
and threw out $7 million,
I'm with you.
Just gave Scott Frost $7 million instead of waiting a week. That was when I stopped caring about their finances. I think they'll be fine one way or the other, and they would be fine if they would have kept Tennessee. But now they're positioning themselves to make more money, and there are bidding wars. I mean, we saw the transfer portal come down to some bidding wars there at the end. So it's not. While I don't worry about their money, I would like them to have more, and this gives them more.
Let me be very clear, and I said this on Friday. I want to play Tennessee. I hate this. I hate that this is the system that the people who run college football, that this is the system that college football now is because of the people in charge. Did Ohio State get punished for having a joke of a non-conference last year? Nope. Did Michigan get punished the year before? Nope. Does the SEC or ACC get punished for having a third bye week, a.k.a. Timbuktu U, that you play as your 4th non-conference game because you only have 8 conference games? No, it is what it is. The business of college football is affecting the game of college football, and I don't like it. But when I try to put myself in other people's shoes. When I put myself in Dannen's shoes, I understand why he did what he did. As much as I dislike it, I understand it and I get it. Somebody did send me this. I didn't, but I watched people have quite the interaction when I posted something last night about Tennessee's AD being a little bit disingenuous about some things and leaving out some info. There was quite the interactions on my timelines, X, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Go give me a follow. # cheap plug. Somebody said, not as embarrassing as Tennessee losing to BYU in 2019 and then paying $2 million to not finish the series in 2023. All right, so our non-conference schedule, 2026, just to remind you, Ohio U. Oh, is that like Ohio, like where Solich was?
Yeah.
How great would that have been?
That would have been great.
Oh, all right. Not going to happen.
Even Tim Alvin, who just recently left,
That's
at least
right.
had a connection to the program.
He was running backs coach when I was a young buck. All right. Ohio U, Bowling Green, North Dakota. 2027, Northern Illinois, Miami of Ohio, Northern Iowa. All right. A lot of MAC, a lot of FCS. All right. Tennessee's athletic director, Danny White. Kind of went off on social media. I think Jake read the nice ones. Left out information. Just simply put it in there. We're mad. We're upset. They don't want to play us. They asked us to back out, to move it back, and we didn't because there's only 1 year. Didn't say that, though. Just put it in there. Give us full context. Just because you're the guy who lost Scott Frost to Nebraska, by the way, you got him. Well, you didn't get him back, but UCF did. Everything comes full circle, I guess. I'm going to guess you held a grudge for all these years. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know. All right, we got one more clip, then we got to get to break. What is the next clip here, Jake? I know you sent me all the titles. Let me find the title. Do you have it in front of you?
Yeah, we can get to the kind of he further talks about scheduling and the adjustments Nebraska will have to make with the renovation at the stadium.
All right, go ahead and run it. We'll go through that quick.
As a fan, I think I think most fans would rather us play, Notre Dame, Texas, and Tennessee, in the non-conference. And I get that. You want the games to be as good as they possibly can. Having 5 home games in one of those years in the Big Ten, those are 5 marquee games. When we're playing 9 conference games, we're going to get normally 5 instead of 5 in 26. Now we're going to have those 4 A4 games. But this is really, I would say, a short-term blip. The long-term of having Arizona and Oklahoma and I think Oklahoma State already on the books long-term. It really is not a change in scheduling philosophy. It's just we're going to have to accommodate. This is not the only bump we're going to have to accommodate to renovate a stadium to the magnitude our stadium needs to be renovated. And it's just maybe the first one our fans have felt. Hopefully there's as few bumps as possible. It's during a construction project, logistically, people are going to have some workarounds and some go-arounds, and it's not going to be as comfortable. But when we come out the other side, there's going to be a lot in front of us, schedule and stadium to boot.
All right. Any instant reaction to that there, Jake?
Well, he said that's the first one we're going to feel. We're obviously going to feel it when we go into the stadium in that season. So it is going to be a little bit different, but I like that he at least started with Nebraska fans rather play Notre Dame and all that. So I mean, it kind of gets you the idea of where it is, but hoping that the Big Ten Conference can kind of make up for the non-con. Being loaded is something that a lot of programs are doing. The last 2 national championships teams have done.
I think I mentioned this the other day. I would, because he brought up Oklahoma, and then we're going to hit the break real quick. We got 4 clips when we come back, and we're not going to get to everything today. All the notes in front of me, and we may or may not get to all the clips because Carriker Trivia is like it's loaded every day, Jake. It's loaded. It's loaded, man. All right, the loaded show. But what if we did 9-1-2, 9 conference games? Everybody plays a Power 4 team. We'll pretend the ACC and Big 12 are on the equal footing with the SEC and Big 10. We'll just continue to live in that facade of a world. And then 2 G5 teams or 1 G5 and 1 FCS if you want. Personally, I wouldn't play the FCS with all due respect. Okay. To me, it'd be 9-1-2. 9 conference, 1 Power 4, 2 G5. Or I would love for there to be some sort of out-of-conference designated rival. And that popped into my head because Miami and Florida don't play every year. Nebraska and Oklahoma. When he said Oklahoma, that's what popped into my head. I would love that. Like USC, Notre Dame, find a way to play every year. Notre Dame's not in a conference, so of course they're not in the same conference, but you get my point. Like, something like that would be cool. Like West Virginia, Pitt, the backyard brawl. They don't play anymore. Like, either a power conference team has to be on your schedule or you have a designated out-of-conference rival that you play every year, and then 2 G5 teams. Let's get back to breaking down Troy Dannen's most recent interview. This next clip, Dannen talks about scheduling for the playoffs. All right. If and when someone calls in, Jake, let me know. In the meantime, go ahead and roll that clip.
You look at what Michigan and Ohio State have done in their non-conference scheduling the last 2 years when they went on to win the national championship. Their schedules there were no non-conference A4s on either of their schedules the year they won the national championship. Now, Indiana didn't this year. That doesn't necessarily give you direction, but I think we're all trying to figure out what the current playoff model, really how the schedule benefits you and how best to schedule to qualify for that playoff. If there's a different model, we'll have to reassess. Is it 14-16? Line me up in the 16 column. But I also see where, there needs to be a reward for winning conference championships and the prospect of getting a couple of buys in there. I think there's so much more to it. Just when do we play, the teams that had the buys this year went 0-4. And is that a matter of who had the buys, or is that a matter of sitting out that week wasn't as advantageous as people might have thought it was? So I think there are so many unanswered questions.
All right. So again, that's per his most recent interview he did with Sean and Steve. So we talked about Michigan, Ohio State, no Power 4 teams on their non-conference schedule. A bunch of cupcakes is what it was. And so people can react however they want with what Nebraska's done, but he kind of explained, hey, this is what Indiana did. This is what teams are doing now. This is what's been created by the powers that be in college football. So I do have a couple of questions real quick, Jake. Would you, and we discussed this briefly last week. We didn't really dive into it. We got a whole offseason to do so. But he said, sign me up for a 16-team playoff. Because I've got two answers to this. One is as a college football purist, and the other is a Nebraska guy. Which would you see? And you can answer it from whatever position you'd like to. Would you rather see a 16-team playoff or 14?
I think I'd probably rather see 16, and I think athletic directors are going to want to see 16. I think the more the merrier for the athletic directors to get their teams into the playoffs. So I understand why he goes there, but I'm just not sure the bye weeks and I know they got to do something to try to make those conference championship games mean something, but I feel like the 14-team playoff is pretty confusing. We've talked about it before. It's really a 24, 28-team playoff with all these things. So
yep.
it's all pretty confusing. I think 16, nice straight across. We know how to Sweet 16 works. That's how I'd prefer.
So hold on, don't get confused. They're still going to have this conference gets automatically 4 and 5 teams. Whether it's 14 or 16 teams, it's still 16 teams. It's still going to have the confusion of the Big Ten instead of maybe the Big Ten getting 4 teams in a 14-team playoff, maybe they get 5. They're still going to have all those because they want their guaranteed money because it's a business. They want to make sure they're getting their same money every year. And so that's the business part of it. So does that change your answer from 14 to 16 or 16 to 14?
No, I mean, I think the SEC and the Big Ten are I think it makes sense for them to get auto bids. I don't like it being, going right up to the number, right? Like if they kept it at 4 in a 16-team playoff, then you'd have 8 open slots. I like that idea. I don't like limiting the Big 12 or the ACC to 2 while guaranteeing 4 for the others, because there are going to be some years where you probably, it just doesn't align that way.
So my first answer is exactly what Troy Dannen said, which is 16. I want what you said, more spots, more opportunities for us to get in. All right, as a Nebraska guy, I want more opportunities. Now, realistically, if we're a 15 seed and a 16 seed and we're playing 1 or 2 in the country, what's that going to look like? All right, so as a college football purist, 14. Because a 1 versus 16, what did basketball play? 5,000 years of NCAA tournament games before we finally had a 16 beat a 1, and in that meantime, you saw 5,000 or 499,000 blowouts. 2 versus 15, I think that actually happened while I was in high school. A 15 finally beat a 2. Like, it's a bunch of blowouts. What I'd rather see as a college football purist is 14, and then all of a sudden the top 2 seeds in the Big Ten and the SEC are playing for a championship and a first-round bye. Now, the other thing that comes back is something he said. When is that bye? Is it 25 days later? Because then I'm not interested. I'm running out my second string and we're losing. Okay, you can have the 25 days off. And we'll be one of the 4 teams this past year in the 12-team playoff that hosted a first-round playoff game at home and then literally went 8-0 until they started playing each other in the Final Four, so to speak. Notre Dame, Penn State, and Ohio State. Who'd they play? Oregon in the Final Four? Is that right? Yeah. No, that's not right. Who'd they play?
Texas.
Texas, that's right. And so for me, the conference championships meant nothing. Not a one of those teams won a conference title. But if we do what I think we should do, which is start playing right after conference championship weekend is over, start playing the playoff the very next weekend. All of a sudden now I'm just getting a normal bye week, which is helpful during the season, which NFL teams fight for to get that number 1 seed. So to me, now the 1 and 2 teams in the Big Ten, the 1 and 2 teams in the SEC are going to be playing for a bye. And I'm much more intrigued by a Texas, Georgia, by a Penn State, Oregon than I am by, I don't know who the number 16 team would have been this year.
South Carolina, Illinois, we're in that.
Well, they were 13th and 14th.
Yeah.
You know, for me, let's say, I know SMU was higher than this, but let's say SMU, or let's say like in Indiana was number 10. But look what happened to them. And they were higher rated. Like the number 1 team in the country playing the number 16 team in the country, which might have 4 losses. Very realistically, it's going to be ugly. I'd rather see Texas, Georgia playing a game that matters. Conference championships matter. The bye week, as long as it's brought up to an appropriate amount of time off, actually is going to be way more intriguing than one blowing out 16 for 5,000 years till we finally get an upset at some point. That's just me. Okay, go ahead. The next clip. Ooh, this is the one I'm thinking of. This could be very interesting. Troy Dannen on how the not spring game might be ran.
Well, I think from a football standpoint, it's Matt's going to decide what football looks like on that day, but there's going to be a lot more around it, and we have an internal group that involves basically every piece of the department trying to figure out what does that weekend look like. I would say at this point, there's going to be some flag football. There are going to be some alums back. There's going to be some media back playing flag. There may be a whole bunch of different teams, different segments against different groups. I would say Matt and I are both pushing hard for, a women's flag game involving, Nebraska's, whether it's our top intramural team, a club team versus an outside team. Women's flag football is going to be a part of the Olympics in LA. The NFL is really pushing it. And so I would imagine that will be a part of the day. I think, and I won't steal an announcement from Danny, but I would guess we will have a volleyball, a spring volleyball game against another college team that weekend. Not in the stadium, but in Dannen.
Okay.
There is a soccer game already scheduled that weekend. So I think you will be. We talked about it being a celebration. I think we'll see a little bit of everything. I think we'll see some skills competitions. I think a lot of what we saw in the Pro Bowl, the Pro Bowl's reinvented itself in some ways, and if you watched it this year, it was actually enjoyable to watch. See people without their helmet and see who they are as a person and have a little fun, and so I think that's the direction this will head.
Dude, there is a lot to unpack there. All right, so let's go to break. And I mean, I was just writing notes. I'd already heard it before, but here my brief, awful, barely I can read notes, but I know what they mean. Alumni coming back in a flag football game. Media. Oh my God, I want to do a reaction to the media flag football game if this happens. All right. And I can't read it. Different segments. I don't even know what that. I just heard it and I don't know what it means. Women's flag football game. Did you know women's flag football is going to be in the Olympics in LA? Dude.
I've seen that.
I have a daughter who, when she hears that, is going to be all about flag football. Volleyball playing, probably. He didn't want to steal her thunder, and then he kind of did. All right, volleyball may play another team, their spring game. All right, soccer team has already got a game. Skills competition, Pro Bowl type stuff. And somebody besides the quarterback getting their face seen. Man, that would be nice as a former D lineman.